Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Classes in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week I sit down with a guest to talk about a Disney Plus offering of their choosing. The show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it. But if you can't, no big deal. The fact you're listening is awesome, and of course we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, and share the podcast with your friends. Joining me this week, we have, welcoming back to the show, Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing great. We're doing a double-header podcast session tonight. Those are always my faves. So I'm feeling alive. Feeling good on this Monday.
For me, it's a double header of double header because I did back-to-back shows yesterday too, to make sure we had our Patreon early access episode of that nerdy site going ready today too. So yeah, and the original idea we had talked about was recording this one yesterday. I was like, I don't really want to do 3 podcasts in one day, so I'm glad we were able to reschedule it for this. So this week we're going to be talking all about, if you haven't already caught it from the title of the episode, Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest. Not the first one, not Curse of the Black Pearl. No. We're jumping straight into Pirates of the Caribbean at the sequel. Yes. Much to like the joke that I made with you, I think off air for anything but when we were talking about this a couple weeks ago, because you had watched the first one, and so that got in my head of like, hey, yeah, that'd be a fun one to do a D plus show for, and so I reached out to you like thinking we would talk about that, and you're like, all right, let's do Dead Man's Chest, and I was like, okay, sure, yeah, let's watch Dead Man's Chest and talk about that one instead. So tell me, Logan, here, why you wanted to talk about Dead Man's Chest, just in general, but also specifically why Dead Man's Chest instead of Curse of the Black Pearl.
So I would like to begin by saying the joke that I've since told to lots of other people, which is that when I was like, we should do Dead Man's Chest, not Curse of the Black Pearl, and you're just like, you know what? Okay, yeah. Why start chasing SEO trends now? And I was like, exactly. Like, let's just commit. Yeah, this is who we are, right? And so for me, it's, I guess, 2 different reasons. First off is that, like, I enjoy the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. And so and you brought it up, and I think it's a good idea just to, these are good movies. As we talked about a few weeks ago on that News You Care About, Polygon had like its oral history of the Pirates of the Caribbean series, and so I kind of brought it back in my mind. I had watched Curse of the Black Pearl a few months back. So those are kind of all under the umbrella of like, I like Pirates of the Caribbean, it's on my mind. But also because I feel like when people think of Pirates of the Caribbean, they think of Curse of the Black Pearl. They think of the first movie, but what they're really thinking of are 2 and 3. I think those are kind of more of what the rest of the series are kind of like, right? Like, especially watching this and then watching, or I guess having watched 1 recently too, it's like 1 is very different. The stakes are vastly smaller. Everything about it is kind of smaller and more intimate. And while I don't think that Jack is like, as crazy, outlandish, or whatever as he'll get in this series, he's beginning to drift in that direction in 2 and 3. Which is, a little different from his Oscar-nominated performance in Curse of the Black Pearl. And so I thought it'd be a fun look at, like, kind of the evolution of this film, and also the fact that this is one that had such a huge impact at the time. As I'm sure we'll get into, like, its box office is just bananas. And so, yeah, I thought it'd be a fun one to kind of dive into this movie in particular.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting diving in and looking at like the trivia on this one. And I agree with your idea in points. I guess like when people think of Pirates of the Caribbean, if they're thinking of it fondly, I would say they're probably thinking about the first movie. And then if they're thinking about like the negative things, it's probably much like with like The Matrix, which is a movie that I think this parallels in many ways
yes,
on the
I've
production
made the
side of
comparison
things.
a lot this weekend. Yeah.
I think the overblown like lack of cohesive story, and or just like consistent story, combined with like this movie being largely set up for the next movie. I think that's where people are like, yeah, I don't know how great that was. This is the first time I've revisited it in a while, and just because I was like, I don't want to go into this blind. I did rewatch the first one as well.
Hell
And
yeah.
the first, like, the Curse of the Black Pearl is like a fun adventure romp
Yeah.
in a.
Yeah.
I mean, like specifically watching Curse of the Black Pearl. So recently, after I've watched Princess Bride in particular, I was surprised at how many like little moments, Princess Bride like moments, are in there. Like the dynamic between Will and Elizabeth, I think, is very much like Wesley and Buttercup in there in in a lot of ways. And then you have basically like Jack being, your Inigo Montoya type character, out for his revenge, and he kind of like he ends up stealing the show effectively. And then this absolutely kind of like goes in so many different directions because of the success that the first one ended up having, and like surprising Disney, and seeing I don't remember if I pulled in some of these trivia things, but like the amount of like troubled development that this one had getting made, like it almost got canceled because they were having such a hard time like nailing down the script. And like, so thinking about that in the context of this movie, I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. They kind of go all over the place on this one instead of just being like the nice, tight, fun adventure that the first one is. This one definitely, I think we've like one of the few things we've touched base on before recording is like this one definitely feels long, at 2.5 hours or whatever
Yes.
it is.
Yeah.
It definitely feels its length, and it is, the first half of basically like the full movie is like 2 and 3 combined, and this is just the first chunk of it that doesn't really like. I guess it kind of ends in an Empire Strikes Back-esque way where it's like, our hero has been, gobbled up by the Kraken, and we don't know, what is next for our adventurers, and that's what they were trying to, bank off of. But I just don't think it didn't work for me too much then, and it still like doesn't work for me all that great now. Like my sister is the most piratey diehard person I know, and even she's like, yeah, this one wasn't as great. Like the first one she legitimately loves, has a whole bunch of like Pirates of the Caribbean like paraphernalia and stuff, and decorated like parts of her office with like pirate hats and just piratesy things, and she, I think, more than anybody I know, would say like, yeah, Curse of the Black Pearl is like the really great one, and everything else is like fine, has its moments. Like this one has its moments, but it also suffers under the weight of trying to like capture lightning in a bottle, and they just didn't.
I think it's
Yeah.
interesting for me, is like a quick thing to touch on too, is there it's not even that this movie's vastly longer than Curse of Black Pearl, because I don't think it is. Like at most it could only be like 15 minutes longer, 20 minutes longer probably than Curse of Black Pearl, because Curse of Black Pearl is probably a little over 2 hours long. It just it just is how these movies are structured is very different, right? Because like this one, it's basically building, and its climax is essentially only like the middle point of what is really one giant movie, and so it's like this weird climax, and it's building in a very strange way where like its first and second act are just kind of a lot of the same thing, that I think kind of does it a disservice. But I think this movie has a lot of really great moments, as we'll get into.
Yeah, looking at it, yeah, this movie is 8 minutes longer than the first one.
That's
and that
insane.
That absolutely feels insane, but it also ties into what you just said of like, it's the first one is 8 minutes shorter, but it's also telling a complete beginning, middle, and end story.
It's a movie.
This gets you the beginning and part of the middle, and we don't get the rest of the middle and the end until the next 2+ hour movie. so yeah, that's where it really feels it. A little bit of the history lesson on this one. This was originally released July 7th, 2006. Other notable releases of the time that I thought were interesting here. Cars was the Pixar movie of the time. Came out June 9th, 2006, a month earlier. The Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift came out June 16th, 2006.
The worst Fast and Furious movie.
I agree. I'm glad we're on the same page on that, despite, many of our friends being idiots.
Yes,
but it also just
so.
it was fascinating to see like that in the time side of things. Superman Returns came out the week before this, June 28th, 2006. Devil Wears Prada was June 30th, 2006. And Clerks 2 came out a couple weeks afterwards, July 21st, 2006. So kind of a summer of sequels, it seemed like. And yeah, the runtime here, 2 hours, 31 minutes. And in the Disney live-action timeline of things, this came out in between The Shaggy Dog, which came out March 10th of 2006 and featured a pre-Iron Man Robert Downey Jr., and Invincible came out August 25th, 2006, and that was the movie where Mark Wahlberg becomes a football player from like just public tryouts kind of thing.
Bartender
so
thing.
a pre-Transformers Mark Wahlberg.
Can I double back to the history lesson and like the releases and just see if you're on the same page with me here? Is The Devil Wears Prada the best of those movies?
Probably, yeah. I would probably say so. I
Devil
mean,
Wears
like
Prada
Cars is
great.
Cars is good. Cars
I like
didn't
Cars.
like capture the Pixar magic. Like Cars was at the time one of the weakest outings of Pixar, but it was still like Pixar, so it was still really good. But yeah, of those, I would probably. I mean, like I honestly I haven't seen Superman Returns, so I can't.
I was just gonna say the same thing.
Yeah, I can't
I've-
really throw behind that. Like, but everything I have seen of it, it suggests Brandon Routh deserved a much better movie than Superman Returns.
Yes,
because he's a great Superman, and they
Yeah,
just
he's so
and the idea of them trying to kind of like continue on with the Christopher Reeves era of Superman, because it's basically supposed to be a direct sequel to like Superman 2.
I think so. Yeah,
Is a fascinating concept, but I think
It's
I think
such a
the
cool
the
idea.
things that jump out at me as somebody who's never been a huge fan of like Superman on screen, like the biggest things I remember were the trailer that got played like ad nauseum of like the bullet being shot into his eye and bouncing off his eye, and him saving the plane.
the plane seems lit.
from crashing. But then like everything I've heard about like the story of it outside of that, I'm just like, I feel like that's not great. So I would probably go with Devil Wears Prada being the highlight
Such
of that
a good
summer.
movie. Such
Yeah.
a good movie.
Diving into the roll call, the who's who of this. Gore Verbinski, of course, is the director here, who, like, I remember thinking at the time that he was a much bigger name, and maybe it was just because I watched, like, MTV, and they were probably hyping him up or something because he came from music videos. But prior to this, he really hadn't done too much in the actual film space. So prior to Dead Man's Chest in particular, he had done a bunch of Bad Religion music videos. He had done the iconic Budweiser Frogs commercial, which I thought, I always love seeing that kind of stuff pop up, like it came up when we did the Hamilton stuff, that like Michael Bay had done the iconic Got Milk commercial, where the Aaron Burr's the answer to the question there. Mouse Hunt is a movie that like it is the only VHS tape that I had when I moved into my apartment that I've been living in for about 18 years now. Like I remember having a Mouse Hunt VHS tape that like my aunt got me for the longest time. Because this is, 2003. DVDs were already, well in the mainstream kind of thing. But I had a copy of Mouse Hunt, and so I've probably seen that movie a few times. But so finding out that Gore Verbinski directed that, kind of funny. And he'd also done The Ring before he kind of landed Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl. The Ring, I mean, I've heard great things about The Ring. Never something I'm going to watch because I'm not a big old spoopy guy. But yeah, then following this, he would go on to do, of course, At World's End, which he'd done kind of in conjunction with this, as well as a couple other Johnny Depp stars in Rango and The Lone Ranger. The writers for this, the writing duo of Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, who have had a some pretty solid hits behind them. Not incredibly numerous, but they kind of had their breakout hit with Aladdin, the '93 Disney Aladdin, and then they went on to do Shrek after that. Treasure Planet is probably one of their weaker outings, but they also worked on that one. And then, of course, they had done Pirates of the Caribbean, Black Pearl prior to this. Starring, of course, you have Johnny Depp coming back as Captain Jack Sparrow, who had, kind of probably made a name for himself doing a lot of that Tim Burton stuff early on, like Edward Scissorhands. Right before he kind of broke out here in the role of Captain Jack Sparrow, he had been doing stuff like Chocolat and Blow, more on the indie side of things. And then he went on to do Sweeney Todd, Alice in Wonderland, and then he is currently kind of portraying Grindelwald in the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them series.
If I can,
yeah, sure.
If I was just gonna say, if I can, just for a second, I love Chocolate. That's such a great movie. That is such.
I don't know if I've seen it, or if I have, it's been like once, and it was probably with like a girlfriend that liked indie art stuff at the time or something.
I saw it for a film class in college, and it's one of my favorite movies that we saw. It is actually like really great, and Johnny Depp is actually like, because that's the thing. Again, like one of the, like Polygon pieces that I referenced earlier in the podcast that had like their oral histories references that like so much of what Johnny Depp has done since 2003 has been him kind of doing different imitations and shades of wacky, kooky character like Jack Sparrow, and he's very much not playing that in that movie, but he's still playing like kind of a like bohemian individual, but one who is like just so cool, and who like I'd actually want to just like hang out with. And the whole movie is really, really fantastic and great. That's all I wanted to say.
Nice. You also have, of course, Orlando Bloom here as Will Turner, who came into Pirates of the Caribbean hot off of Lord of the Rings, kind of where he'd made his debut as Legolas. And he hasn't really done too much in a post-Pirates world, of
Didn't need you after that in Lord of the Rings, yeah.
Yeah, he did like he came back and reprised the role of Legolas for the Hobbit films. He did Elizabethtown and has done like a couple like romantic comedies. That was basically like the track that they were trying to kind of push him down, and just didn't really seem to stick. You have Keira Knightley in here as Elizabeth Swann, who of course was famously one of the like Natalie Portman lookalikes in The Phantom Menace.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then she had also done, and I probably didn't see Bend It Like Beckham until after having a huge crush on Keira Knightley from the Pirates movies, but I remember watching Bend It Like Beckham and enjoying her portrayal in that. And then she would go on and do Love Actually, King Arthur, Pride and Prejudice, Atonement, and one of her more recent ones that I remember seeing in theaters, The Imitation Game, kind of alongside Benedict Cumberbatch. Jack Davenport playing Norrington, who I don't know if I'd seen this before Pirates of the Caribbean. Probably not. It was probably something that my sister introduced to me because of her love of pirates. But he was in a British TV show called Coupling that was basically like the British version of Friends. But it was a combination, I would say, of Friends and the kind of different kinds of storytelling that How I Met Your Mother would end up doing later down the line.
Ooh, okay.
Like they would do kind of episodes of Coupling that were like, we're gonna split screen this, and you're gonna see like the guy's perspective and you're gonna see the girl's perspective kind of going in tandem on like getting ready for a date or something like that. And Jack Davenport was in Coupling, and I want to say it only went for like 3 or 4 seasons, and they're very short seasons, as many British shows were. But it was like, as somebody that never got into Friends myself, Coupling was a very funny Friends type of show where it's like, you know, a few guys and a few girls kind of like becoming friends, and yeah, like the interminglings of some of the relationship things there. He also, of course, did all the other Pirates things for a little while, and then he would later go on and do other shows that I did actually watch, of Flash Forward, which I think Jazz and and Frank talked about on an episode of that Nerdy Site show like a month or two back as like one of those weird like one season only kinds of shows, and it was like Flash Forward was definitely trying to be like Lost, and it just didn't succeed. But he was in that. He was in the musical theater TV show Smash. And then he was also in Kingsman: The Secret Service, as well as this year or last year he was in The Morning Show, which is one of those Apple shows. Bill Nighy playing Davy Jones here, of course. Done lots of UK stuff over the years. Most notably, probably Love Actually. He's a fan or friend of the Cornetto trilogy guys, so he was in Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz and At World's End, or no, The World's End. He was also in At World's End, the next Pirates movie, but and I always confuse those two things. He's also in one of my very favorite episodes of Doctor Who, the Vincent and the Doctor episode, where he's playing the museum curator that speaks very glowingly about Vincent van Gogh. He was Rufus Scrimgeour in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. And then most recently, he has been in Pokemon Detective Pikachu, as well as Emma, right before everything went to shit. And he's in the animated Netflix show Castlevania.
He's fantastic in Emma, just as a aside. Also,
he is.
Really good in Love Actually,
delightful.
now that I think about it, too.
Yeah. I mean, he's Bill Nighy. He's really
great.
good.
He's just everything it is, yeah.
Jonathan Pryce in here as Governor Swan. Of course, because Logan is on the show, I had to pull in that he was the bad guy in Tomorrow Never Dies.
Yes, he was.
And then he would later go on. He was the High Sparrow in the Game of Thrones in some of those seasons. He was in the TV show The Crown, and then he was even, I believe, nominated for an Oscar last year for The Two Popes.
He is good in Tomorrow Never Dies. I don't know. It's my least favorite of the Pierce Brosnan saga of James Bond films, because to me, at least, Tomorrow Never Dies fails one of the cardinal rules of a James Bond film, and that it's just not that fun. It's not a bad movie at all. Like, if you just like looked at it objectively, it's like this movie hits everything it should be hitting. It's a well-made movie, just not that much fun. And his villain is kind of part of that, which is like he's like an evil newspaper editor. He's basically playing Rupert Murdoch, just to be clear. He's playing Rupert Murdoch.
Exactly.
But it's like, this isn't
but
fun.
like well ahead of his time.
Yeah.
well ahead of like Rupert Murdoch taking over Fox News and like Fox News taking over all that kind of shit. So yeah, it's like, but yes, it doesn't lend itself to action.
Yes, is
to
the
great
problem.
fun action sequences. You have Stellan Skarsgård kind of making his debut in the Pirates of the Caribbean series as Bootstrap Bill, who was referred to in the prior movie. Stellan Skarsgård, of course, being in Good Will Hunting, Mamma Mia, Thor and the Avengers, and most recently Chernobyl, and then he's going to be in the upcoming Dune. Tom Hollander playing Cutler Beckett, another introduction into the series here. I pulled in, he'd done Pride and Prejudice, and then he would later go on to do About Time, as well as he was in the Bohemian Rhapsody a couple years ago. And this caught my eye because I talked about Harley Quinn on one of the recent episodes of that Nerdy Site show. He plays the voice of Alfred, Batman's Alfred in Harley Quinn.
That is actually
and then another Bond tie-in for you, Naomi Harris playing Tia Dalma, who had done 28 Days Later prior to this, and then has gone on to do Skyfall and Spectre, and will eventually do No Time to Die when that comes out. And she's Moneypenny, right? In the modern Bond.
She's Moneypenny.
Yeah. She also did Moonlight, and she was in the Rampage movie, which Rampage is another game I meant to mention when we were talking on the podcast we recorded right before this one, which goes live tomorrow. Because Rampage was a game I absolutely played a ton of growing up. So when I went and saw the Rampage movie with The Rock, Naomi Harris being kind of the love interest character in that, I thought was interesting, because I never would have put together her as Tia Dalma in that.
So here's the thing. I had no idea there was no Naomi Harris until I saw this on the doc about 3 minutes ago. Actually blew my mind. She looks so different. That is crazy to me.
I mean, this is 14 years ago, so yeah,
Also
definitely.
That,
One of the things that like leapt out at me that I'll throw in here because we're not talking about Curse of the Black Pearl, but was the realization that Anna Maria in Curse of the Black Pearl is Gamora. What's her name? Zoe Saldana.
Yeah.
It is a very young
right.
Zoe Saldana being
right. Yeah, I
being
forgot
the very angry, and she gets a little nod in one of the trivia things coming up here. But yeah, it's one of those things of like, oh, it's sad she didn't come back. She wasn't one of the people that came back from the crew for this one, but she was probably off getting ready to make Star Trek or something like that at the time. I don't remember the timing of all of those movies, but so yeah, into the trivia. This movie, of course, as we've touched on many a time, was shot back to back with Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, which would come out the next summer. The majority of the Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl set was destroyed in a hurricane and had to be rebuilt for Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, and and At World's End. Gore Verbinski originally wanted Davy Jones to be Dutch, as he is the captain of the Dutchman. Bill Nighy, however, responded, "I don't do Dutch, so I decided on Scottish." I love that is a quote. As you mentioned earlier, this was kind of monumental in its box office opening at $135,634,554 domestically in its opening weekend. It was the first motion picture to reach $100 million, the fastest, accomplishing the feat in 2 days. And it was the highest grossing movie of 2006. Movie held the box office record for highest opening weekend that year, at that $135 million. The former record holder had been Spider-Man 2 from a couple years earlier in 2004, and the record was eventually then broken the following year by Spider-Man 3.
Not a great movie.
For that year of 2006, Dead Man's Chest came out and took the crown. And then, like, now fast forward, 14 years or 13 years, I guess, last year, and Endgame makes $1 billion or God, did they do $2 billion in that opening weekend? No, they ultimately made it up to $2 billion. But yeah, friggin' crazy.
It's
how much because this is also, this is pre-superhero.
Yeah.
This is pre-Marvel doing anything. Yeah. So this is 2 years before Iron Man would make its debut. Superheroes, obviously, with X-Men and Spider-Man were going on and constantly kind of trading that crown. But yeah. Sorry, were you going to add to that?
I was going to add just to the enormity of its box office haul this is a movie that crossed $1 billion at the box office. And by the time it left theaters, it was the third highest grossing movie of all time at the time. It's now number 35th, I believe, to Trevor's point of how both inflation and a wave of movies since then have kind of transformed the video, the film industry. But at the time, it crossed $1 billion and was the third highest grossing movie ever.
Yeah, one of the bits of trivia that I saw, I didn't pull in here, but was basically the Pirates of the Caribbean is the 12th highest grossing franchise of all time. Mm-hmm. And when you think about it, that being only 5 movies, it's pretty solid. So yeah, good for them. It is stated in the DVD commentary that the scene where several people argue how to pronounce Kraken was added due to an error by Kevin McNally, who plays Mr. Gibbs. The word is pronounced Kraken, but when McNally first said the creature's name, he pronounced it Kraken, and this caught on with the rest of the cast. So the scene was added to show how the creature's name is actually pronounced. And I just thought that was a funny little, weird thing. That's why dialect coaches come in handy on sets. But also... Yeah. I have always thought of it as Kraken, not Kraken. So
I've also said of it as Kraken as well.
I'm part of the problem. The gigantic wheel upon which the sword fight between Sparrow, Turner, and Norrington takes place weighed 1,800 pounds, 816.4 kilograms, and stood 18 feet, aka 5.4 meters tall. And that being I think we talked about this back when we talked about Pirates of the Caribbean. That was the one set piece from this movie I remembered was that. And so when I'm an hour and a half into the movie, I'm like, was I remembering that wrong? Is that not in this movie? Because it takes forever to get
I also
to
had the same thought, even
sequence.
Though I was I know it's in 2, but we're really far into this and it has not happened yet.
Yeah, where does it happen? And then we get to the island where they're all abandoned or whatever. For a dose of authenticity in the final twist of the at the end of the film, the actors were not told prior to filming that Jeffrey Rush would be appearing in the movie. They were told the scene was shot with and that the person coming down the stairs would be Anna Maria, aka Zoe Saldana from Pirates: Curse of the Black Pearl. The look of surprise on their faces as Rush descends are genuine. I thought that was an interesting thing. And then also again, like, oh, it's sad that Zoe Saldana wasn't like back in the series here. So yeah,
that's actually one of those ones that are like one of those great like trivia facts in terms of like directors doing something like that. So I've actually known about that last fact for like a decade, and I've loved it. I've always found that like one of the coolest things, like whenever directors do that, like not tell an actor like when somebody else is about to like walk down, so you can capture like a genuine reaction. That's a really cool little fun fact I've always thought.
Yeah, I'm okay with it in certain contexts. At other times, though, I think like that very easily becomes like actors, especially like in certain roles, are like being very vulnerable and opening themselves up to experiences, and it's really easy to take advantage of that and abuse that. And so like in this kind of setting, like I'm sure this wasn't the case. But if I was one of those actors and had like a really bad experience with Jeffrey Rush, that would not have been a fun time. Like finding out that, oh shit, I'm going to have to do another movie with this guy. Fuck this. Like that would not have been a fun experience. So again, I'm sure like that wasn't the case, but on the flip side, like I am increasingly bothered by hearing directors kind of do that kind of thing to try and get like the quote unquote genuine reaction. Because guess what? You're paying these people to act. So that's what they should be doing. You shouldn't be trying to like play mind games with them to do this. It can be very abusive. And so I would be wary of that kind of thing. But maybe that's just me. Anyway, let's dive into what do we think of the movie and how does it hold up. So I will throw it to you first, Logan. What did you think of Pirates 2 here? How does it hold up here some 14 years later?
Yeah. I think it's still good. Like, I still enjoy it. I still stand by that it is, I would say, probably still the second best Pirates movie. It's one for me of, as me and Trevor have, I think, referenced to maybe danced around a few times, the movie is long. The movie is very long. It doesn't need to be so long. But I also think that when this movie works, like I think it works pretty well, and I really enjoy it. I think the last maybe like 30 or 40 minutes really come together and are a ton of fun. And I think that one thing I will give this movie is that because it is so long, and is essentially like the beginning and first half of one giant movie, they get to spend more time just kind of exploring the world of Pirates of the Caribbean, which I actually did enjoy at times, right? Like I feel like if this had just been one movie that had like a beginning, middle, and end, we would have missed out on some of the other things that helped kind of flesh out this world. Because at the end of the day, I think the world of the Pirates of the Caribbean is so cool and interesting, and I just want to spend time in it. And so in that aspect, I think this is a really unique and kind of fun movie to just like soak up. I would have made it tighter, but with it not being so tight, I think we got some cool moments and some abilities to explore more of this world and really just Jack, because the like low-key thing is that like Will kind of sucks after the first movie. I don't think Elizabeth is particularly amazing in 2 either. It's real cool in 3. But I think, it allows kind of more exploring of some of these other characters and some of these other locations. So I think that's cool. It's maybe not like as fantastic as I initially thought in 2006, but I was also prepared for that. And like, again, like this is 2 and 3 are kind of the pivot movies that transition us from what Pirates of the Caribbean 1 is, where it is like that movie is Will and Elizabeth are the main characters of that film, and Jack is very much a like supporting character. who just steals the film. To by the time of like 4 and 5, these are Jack Sparrow movies, where he is like unquestionably the main character, and I think that transition is like happening throughout all of 2 and 3, and you could argue for better or worse, but it is unquestionable that it is occurring and that he's becoming a bigger role in these films.
Yeah, I think the movie is very overstuffed, and I think
Yes.
it goes into a whole bunch of like lore and backstory that it doesn't need to.
Nope.
It doesn't add anything to it. Like the one of the sequences that I'm thinking about even now, when you're talking about like, yeah, Elizabeth kind of sucks in this. I'm thinking, yeah, like what were standout Elizabeth moments? Oh, she has that thing where like she pretends to be a guy on the other ship, and then does that thing where like she's using her wedding dress to like scare the people. I'm like, you could cut that whole thing out, and you're not losing anything from that movie. I think even like talking about this and then thinking about it in the context of like it holding the record between Spider-Man's 2 and 3, like I think this suffers the Spider-Man 3 issue of like this introduces too many villains, in that like it sets up Beckett as a bad guy, it sets up Davy Jones as a bad guy, and neither of those get paid off in this movie. And then it kind of even still flirts with the idea of Norrington as a bad guy. And so it's just like, yeah, there's no like there's no comeuppance for anything. There's no like our heroes don't win. And fine if you want to do the Empire Strikes Back version of that, I guess that's fine. But it doesn't leave a satisfying conclusion, especially just because like the one of the things that always gets me is like the first time we see the Kraken, he just like destroys that ship in an instant. Like you're looking at the ship on the horizon, and it's it's clearly they're gonna die because of like we sit on it for so long, and then it's just gone. And then like every time after the Kraken comes out, like the Kraken just starts playing with its food more and more or something like that. And it's just like they set that whole thing up poorly, in my opinion. And then also we've got that whole like random tangent over where Jack is like leading the tribe of cannibals and stuff, and I think that's another section that just doesn't add anything to this movie. And especially watching it now and just like being more socially conscious, and the idea of like the tribal island tribe kind of thing being portrayed in the negative light of like cannibals or whatever. It's like, yeah, not a great look having a couple of white guys like write that, and it being such a long extended sequence. I was just like, yeah, this is uncomfortable. I don't need to be doing this. And it just like the idea that like the crew was split up into two cages just because one of them just needed to be like, hey, we're going to kill these people off, so we need to make sure that it doesn't have anybody that you like or you might like from the the crew of the first movie, putting them in there. And yeah, there's just a lot of like unnecessary stuff in this movie that doesn't add anything to this movie or like the overall lore of it. So you could have cut probably an hour out of this movie and still told the same story, just without extra detours that you didn't need in the first place.
I think one of the things that 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 all kind of do for Pirates is the same thing that I think people critiqued Solo for, right? Or that like I've critiqued, stories that try to expand on these characters who are just really cool. And then it's that thing of like, but I don't need to know more about their backstory necessarily, right? Like, I think Jack is still good in this movie. I still like Jack. I think Johnny Depp is still giving a good performance. But like all of the information we learn about Jack Sparrow's backstory in this movie, I like almost none of it. And it's that thing of like whenever you kind of find out how these characters actually kind of came to be, for lack of a better word, you better make it really good, because otherwise it's going to be like, oh, that's just actually kind of disappointing, though, because I don't love that, right? And it's the same thing for me, at least, for like the Solo movie in Star Wars. like some of the like stuff about Dumbledore and Fantastic Beasts, which is like, it's not how I envisioned this. I don't, and, I mean, it's like that kind of like disappointment thing, or like Boba Fett, if you're some Star Wars fans who thought that character was ever cool. And so I think that that's also kind of a problem that is plaguing two and I mean, again, really all of the Pirates movies. I mean, God forbid when you get to four. But I think, again, it goes back to that same central thing of like, they were like, well, what really worked in one? Jack Sparrow. Let's give it more Jack Sparrow. And unfortunately, they did. And some of it worked, but some of it didn't, right? And then we'll get to like favorite moments in a minute. And, you know, both of my big ones involve Jack, but some of my least favorite parts also kind of involve storyline beats involving him. And I actually think that, to your point, Trev, the Spider-Man 3 comparison is actually really apt. There's just a lot It's weird. Like, I almost feel like, to me, this is a combination of Spider-Man 3 and Phantom Menace, where there's a lot happening and there's a lot going on, like Spider-Man 3, but sort of like Phantom Menace, none of it's really, not none of it, but like a good chunk of it is not necessarily super interesting. It's just sort of happening and you're just kind of watching it. And part of that is because there is like an A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H storyline all kind of happening at once. And like, I'm just kind of like, I guess, yeah, I can, oh, okay, now we have another villain. Okay, oh, okay, yeah, okay, yeah. And like, I never know which one is like the big bad villain, and I never know who to care about the most. And not in a cool way of like they keep switching like back and forth, and it's like a dope kind of like game against each other, but more just because like they don't really seem that great. I think Davy Jones is a cool villain. I wish it had just been a Davy Jones villain movie. For me, was it Cutler Beckett does
Yep.
almost nothing for me. He's just a shorter, nastier Norrington from the first movie who's not as good because he doesn't kind of have like flirting with being also like actually just a good guy at the end of the day. He's just like, I'm just a bad guy, but like I'm born because of it. And I think his chemistry with other characters also I don't love as much. It's just like it's an unfortunate kind of thing. And I also I'll acknowledge that it's hard to build multiple movies off an amusement park ride. And that, to your point earlier, like, it is hard to track lightning in a ball again. But, you know, on the whole, I like the movie. On the whole, I think this movie is still good. I take away more positive than negative from Dead Man's Chest for sure.
Yeah, I mean, at the same point, like, they're not making movies off of the ride anymore, though. Like, even the first one is like has very loose like ties to the ride in that it kind of copies some imagery and stuff like that. Like, the movies themselves are much more just like pirate themed Indiana Jones movies. They're just like, hey, let's find an adventure thing based on, you know, pirate lore or something like that. And so, Davy Jones' locker. Let's explore what Davy Jones' locker actually is and who Davy Jones is and all that stuff. It's like, okay. And then when you get into the other, you know, at Stranger Tides gets into like the Fountain of Youth or something like that. I still haven't seen Dead Men Tell No Tales, the last one, so I don't know what that one goes after, but I imagine it's the same kind of thing, you know, they're looking for an El Dorado or something like that. It's whatever. So it like there's it still is just like it's too generic action adventure-y for me, I guess, really. And yeah, I think a lot of that stuff like Cutler Beckett is just like, well, they want to keep Norrington a fun character of gray, so they need somebody to be like the bad guy, and so Cutler Beckett gets introduced as the bad guy on like the realistic side of things and the East India Trading Company side of things, and then they can still have like the bad guy on the, you know, metaphysical side of things with Davy Jones. And but Davy Jones is going to ultimately just be misunderstood because he's got, spoilers, you know, he's in love with a girl kind of thing. And, you know, he can be redeemed. And so you need Beckett then to be the ultimate bad guy or whatever. It's just like, okay. But being bad just for the sake of being bad isn't fun, especially when, like, he's so easily outmatched by, you know, our heroes, I guess. So, yeah, I think it suffers from a lot of those kinds of things. But in terms of like the moments that I do really like, like I said, the standout set piece for me really is the fight on
It's
the
so
water wheel,
cool.
and
Yeah.
just kind of that the three-way fight, even like leading up to that, the three of them fighting on the beach with Elizabeth there shouting and kind of like calling them out for having their big old dick measuring contest kind of thing, is just a fun sequence throughout. I think in rewatching it, yeah, probably goes a little long, but at least they find ways to have fun with it still, like fighting within the wheel, on the top of the wheel, before the wheel starts moving, when the wheel's moving, and they're having to kind of like keep their footwork going. Jack being in the middle of the wheel or whatever. Like they definitely like exhaust the hell out of using that wheel, which is a nice like evolution from the fight between Jack and Will in the blacksmith thing from the first movie.
Yep.
Like they basically like that very much feels like, well, we need to one up that fight because that was a fun fight. That was very much the like Man in Black versus Inigo Montoya fight from Princess Bride, again, kind of drawing back to that one. And so this movie very much is like, okay, yeah, we got to take that first movie and make it bigger and better. This is going to be the new blockbuster franchise for Disney. And because this is before again, before Marvel starts doing anything, so let alone before Disney starts buying Marvel. Disney hasn't bought Star Wars yet at this point. This is like Disney trying to like jump in and stay in the like summer blockbuster, let's make the big $100 million movies, because they've seen now like Spider-Man doing it and that kind of stuff. They've seen Sony doing it, so they're trying to figure out how to capitalize on it for themselves. And so yeah, everything had to be bigger and better than Pirates, and they hit bigger in a lot of sequences, but not necessarily better in a lot of them for me. And so yeah, like the water wheel fight is like the one real standout thing for me. And like I'm very hard pressed to think of like other real moments that I liked in this one. I like some of the new characters.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily understand why like the I always forget their names, Rigetti or whatever, the two pirates that were like the one the Laurel and Hardy pirates basically from the first one. They come back because again, yeah, they were popular characters and people liked them, so you got to bring them back in. And I like whenever I see them, I feel bad for the Laurel and Hardy guys on the British team side from the first movie, that because they don't get to come back. Yeah, they were more exposition, and like both of them filled like expositional roles in the first movie, but these guys were pirates, so they were a little more fun, and one of them had a wooden eye, so ha ha ha. So yeah, like I guess I like some of the sea battle stuff, I guess, and like them loading in all of the like all the silverware and stuff into the cannons and the little funny stuff that kind of entails. But yeah, it's like I when you saying like this is the second best Pirates movie, I'm just like so much of it's forgettable for me, and admittedly, like I remember probably even less of At World's End, so that one's probably also forgettable. So maybe by default, this one is still the second best in my book, and I just am so far removed from it. But it is so far down from the first Pirates movie in my mind. Like I just it's a fine movie, but like the first Pirates movie is like a legitimately great action movie.
Absolutely.
And this one just doesn't come anywhere near the heights of the first one for me.
No, I mean, I definitely think. I mean, again, I think the first Pirates movie is like legitimately like fantastic. Like, it is such a great action movie. And like one thing I feel like I always forget about Pirates, whether it's 1, 2, or 3, is like how dark these movies are too. Like they're all three are very dark films, both visually and also like thematically. Like they deal very heavy, and like it is like a weirdly dark PG-13 blockbuster, I feel like. Like again, as like a spoiler, like 3 literally begins with like a mass hanging of like 13 pirates, and like these films are dark, and I think I've always kind of liked the fact that like they don't really shy away from that. It's like being a pirate is not necessarily like their downsides to this as well, and just like this world in the 1700s. I think for me, one of the things I've always liked is like Jack walking right into the Kraken. Like I think that's a cool visual shot, and so it's always been one of my favorite moments, both from when I first saw it to now. Like I still think it just is cool, even though I think again how they kind of resolve that in 3 is really dumb. In this moment, it was really cool, and I think if they'd really been really brave about it and really like bold about it, they actually would have let him die there. Obviously, I get why they don't, because in a lot of ways, especially after these two movies in 2 and 3, Pirates of the Caribbean is Jack Sparrow, but it would have been a really cool. But either way, it's a great scene and a great moment for me. Like on the whole, in terms of like judging it, right? Like to bridge to like the report card section, I still think Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest is like, I mean, I would say like a B minus. Like I enjoy the movie. I'm someone who likes pirates movies and likes action movies. And that's part of it. And like again, I just enjoy my time. Like let me just stress, the movie's way too long, but on the whole, like I enjoyed my time with it. On the whole, I think it's a good movie still. I imagine you'll be like a letter grade lower than me, but that's where I think would peg it ultimately.
Yeah, one other thing I did want to highlight that I do like about the movie that I was just thinking about is, before I go into my own grade, is I think Stellan Skarsgård as Bootstrap Bill
yes.
is a good addition
Yes.
to the film,
Mm-hmm.
and getting to see like him, like he was clearly set up as like an interesting kind of like lore-ish character, and the idea that like, I mean, because like especially going into this movie for the first time, we didn't know, or maybe it was revealed in the trailers or something like that. But like you end the first movie and it's like, well, Bootstrap Bill probably is still down at the bottom of the ocean. So now that the curse has been lifted, he's probably dead. And so finding out that he's been, he's taken on to Davy Jones's crew and all that stuff, and that you get to have kind of his dynamic with Will is nice. And I especially like the game of liar's dice that they play, and I ended up liking it way more when I would play it myself in Red Dead Redemption. But liar's dice here, how it gets introduced, and basically you realize immediately when he like jumps into play the game that he's going to sacrifice himself for Will, is a nice little moment. So that's I do want to give a shout out to that as well.
Yes.
As far as like, yeah, go ahead.
I like, now you made me have one more thing too. And in a very ironic fashion, you brought one more positive, and I'm going to bring one more negative. I don't, I don't love. I think the end of the movie is like a cool moment of like, oh, it's a great reveal, right? Like thing, and like that's like a cool tease. And then again, I think maybe part of the reason why I don't like 3 as much is because like I think the execution, a lot of like the ideas that I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, are executed on badly. I think Captain Barbossa is the river song of the series, where they're great in their first appearance, and I really love them, and then like every time I see them after that, I kind of like them a little bit less, especially because like he hangs around so long, like he's spoiler in this series all the way through the 5th film, and it's just like I don't right, because like if Jack becomes kind of a caricature and a cartoon of himself over time, so does Barbossa, and it's like he's so good. Like you just watched one, like he's so good in the first movie, like he's such a great villain in the first movie, and like I've never, like, even at the time I was like, I don't like the fact that he's gonna become like a buddy with him, right? It's like that same thing that happens every now and again in like series or TV shows where it's like the villain himself is so popular that like we decided to make him a good guy now, but it's like, but then what made him cool is no longer really valid and relevant, and like he just becomes kind of like, especially in the later movies, this kind of like buffoonish version of himself, and it's just like, he's still cool here because like he's in it for 5 seconds, and it's like, holy shit, how is this possible? And then he's fine in 3. I don't need him in 4, and I really, really don't need him in 5, is what I will say.
Yeah, he's very much. It's the like, oh, like everybody really likes Moriarty, so we got to put Holmes and Moriarty together for a case or something like that. It's very much that vibe to it. Yeah, I agree. I like even thinking about it now, I'm like, I don't remember how like that gets explained away that he's
It's
back.
just nonsense.
It's just, I mean, the whole thing is like, it's all phantasmical nonsense. So of course, if he can come back, of course now we know that Jack can come back and all this stuff. And so yeah, it's again the movie relying too much on the first movie and trying to retread too many of those moments in a way that just ends up weakening it, and it can never get out of the first movie's shadow as a result.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, I echo that as well. It's like, I love Jeffrey Rush, but yeah, I would have been completely more fine with him just being Barbossa in the first movie, and just just having that great final moment in that first movie where Jack saves his shot for that right moment, and Barbossa realizes it, and he is so happy that he can feel again, even if it is him dying. Like,
that's such a good final
him coming
scene.
down and eating an apple. It's like, yeah. It's like, okay, sure. Now he gets his apple too. Great, fine, whatever. Ultimately, yeah, I give it. I was thinking about when you were like, before you said a B minus. I was probably sitting in like the C plus B minus range. But I think just thinking about it more and just like the things I don't like about it, I'm like, yeah, it's probably it's a C. It is just a solid C for me. Just like an average movie across the board. It risks being lower because it should be so much better, but I'll stick with a C. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this one that you can go watch on Disney Plus. You have basically almost all the other Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
There are lots.
At World's End is, of course, the immediately suggested one. Then you have Dead Men Tell No Tales and The Curse of the Black Pearl. Notably, On Stranger Tides is not recommended because it is not currently on Disney Plus. I don't know who has the license rights to it right now, but it was one of those that just kind of like, it was on Disney Plus, and then it left Disney Plus beginning of this year, I think, or end of last year, something like that, because of the legacy deals that they had in place before Disney Plus became a thing. So it's probably over on like HBO or Netflix or something like that right now. Other suggestions: National Treasure. Again, a fun adventure one. I didn't put it in the roll call, but I'm pretty sure the writing team, I don't know if they worked on the first National Treasure, but I know I saw a Book of Secrets in their writing credits, so they worked on the second one, the follow-up. You also have The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, The Princess Bride, as was mentioned earlier, Avatar, the blue Avatar one, the James Cameron Avatar, and then Finest Hours, which I had to remember which one that was, and I'm pretty sure that's like Chris Pine, like leading a Coast Guard team or something like that, and like a perfect storm type of event happens, and they're having to go out and save people out at sea or something like that. So, so that is another one of those suggestions of like, oh, okay, apparently that's on Disney Plus. Oh, one of the things that did jump out at me before we walk away from this, on Disney Plus in particular, and in the first movie as well, but like in this one as well, the body count and the amount of violence and death that is in these movies just is like almost a level of jarring to see it like on the like very family friendly Disney Plus kind of thing. Like the fact that one of my favorite like deaths in Curse of the Black Pearl is when they stick the bomb in that little guy's body as the skeleton, then push him into the light, and he goes like, "No fair," and then just blows up. It's fun, but it's also like, wow, yeah, this is definitely like, I wonder if Disney would make like it's so much more of a mature direction for a Disney movie. Just the level of violence and in particular in like Curse of the Black Pearl, like all the skeletons just like slitting the throats of the people on the ship, and just like seeing that was like jarring.
I think at the time it was Disney's first PG-13 live action film.
Probably, yeah. That sounds right. Anyway, extracurriculars. You watching anything else on Disney Plus recently, Logan?
Attack the Clones. Did that a few weeks back. Revenge of the Sith will be next, and then we'll finally finish the Star Wars kind of saga, the 1 through 6. And then otherwise, not much. I have looked at the idea of, this is not on Disney Plus at all, but it's a thing that's on my mind, of possibly going and starting watching all of the Batman movies. So we'll see. Keep an ear out for that, maybe.
Kind of Funny is about to do Batman in review, so
hey, maybe we'll
watch along with them.
Yeah. So we'll see about that. What about you?
So for me, my Saturday was a triple header of watching Curse of the Black Pearl, then this one, and then because of the passing of Chadwick Boseman, I sat down and rewatched Black Panther Saturday night, and just like that one's a real good movie.
Yeah.
And you know is can easily be seen in a very different light as a result of his unfortunate and untimely passing. But I kind of joined in with many people rewatching that this weekend in his honor to celebrate his life. So shout out to Black Panther, easily one of the best of the Marvel movies, and just an incredible performance from him. Which I had always we had talked about this on the Patreon early access episode that's up now. Jazz and I sat down and talked about kind of Chadwick Boseman as well as like other celebrity mournings that we've or other celebrities that we've mourned when they've passed, and Chadwick in particular, like his performance is one of those that I've always really enjoyed in Black Panther, but it didn't get nearly like the praise as Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger because Killmonger is the much flashier kind of character. But I always loved the maturity and the stillness and the quiet grace that he brought to the role of T'Challa. So it was fun kind of getting to, I mean, not fun, but I enjoyed getting to go back and revisit that this weekend. So that was the other thing I've been watching on Disney Plus. But yeah, that's going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you to Logan for joining me to talk about Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. Maybe we'll sit down and watch At World's End sometime and do that one in the near future as well. Mm-hmm. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie. Anything you want to give a shout out to, Logan?
I would like to plug this week's episode of That News You Care About, which you can listen to tomorrow when this goes live. It's me and Trev talking about some of our earliest gaming memories, some of our fondest early gaming memories. And I thought it was a really good conversation, actually. So I'm going to give that a shout out.
Cool. Yeah, you can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey, and I will echo that shout out. It was a fun little chat that we had immediately before this one. So yay for recording podcasts out of order and all that fun stuff. But or I guess in order, but out of like release order or something like that. Yeah, because this is going to go up first. Check out all of that fun stuff. You follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, and if you'd like to be part of this show, you can go to thatnerdysite.com/D+guest, or go to just hit me up on Twitter and let me know what Disney Plus offering you would like to come on and talk about, and I will try and be better about scheduling those and getting other guests on. If you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with all your friends and all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. That's going to do it for this week. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.